Thank you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We are here to celebrate this very special, important day, the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We are still waiting for a couple of important guests, so I would ask your indulgence to wait for a couple of minutes more. Thank you. Yes. So I think that our guests will forget us if we start now. So to be able to follow the schedule, I would like to welcome you all, as I said, to this important day. In the year 2017, there are 1 billion and more persons with disabilities out of 7 billion in the world. And it's an honor for us to be here and bring their voices here, even the voices of those who cannot be sitting here. But we are giving voice to that 1 billion persons with disabilities around the world. The theme that we are going to be discussing throughout the day is transformation towards sustainable and resilient societies for all. And I would like to acknowledge the co-sponsors of the day, the permanent mission of Antigua and Barbuda. I saw the ambassador coming in a few minutes ago. Thank you very much. Bulgaria, who is chairing the bureau that organizes the Conference of the State Parties on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Ecuador, always very close to our work and ready to support us. Thank you very much. We have also Germany, extremely attentive to the needs and the skills and abilities of persons with disabilities. Italy, well, my home country. Thank you very much. Allow me something personal here. Very active as well. Japan, always present, particularly when it comes to issues related to natural disaster, infrastructures, and making sure that people not only survive, but can really escape from major disasters. Thank you very much to Japan. New Zealand has shown throughout the years its support to the issue of persons with disabilities. The Republic of Korea, no words. They are tremendous supporters of this issue. Thank you very much. And the Republic of San Marino. It's a little mountain, apparently, of 33,000 people, but they are so active, particularly when it comes to promoting a tourism that is accessible and inclusive of all persons, as well as the European Community and the NGO Committee on Aging. So we're gathered here today to highlight the crucial contributions made by persons with disabilities in promoting inclusive societies and, of course, development. We also recognize the long-standing partnership with the civil society organizations who do play important roles in addressing the needs and perspectives of persons with disabilities at the global, regional, and local level. So our societies must pursue disability-inclusive policies to ensure that persons with disabilities participate in all spheres of societies on an equal basis with others. Dignity has no name. Dignity has no ability or disability. It's people. And the UN Charter says, we the people. That's what we're talking about today. People with different skills, different needs, and different abilities. Persons with disabilities with their unique experience and expertise can make important contributions to the design, development, and implementation of innovative solutions, and policy programs to advance the resilience of societies, especially in the, in the context of humanitarian actions, disaster risk reduction, and accessible urban development. Resilience. Allow me again to add here something personal. It's resilience that enabled me, since I was 6 years old and became paraplegic, to make it through. It's resilience, the ability to look at challenges and make out the best of them. Behind the challenge, there is a tool to win. We have to find that tool. And those are the tools we want to identify today when it comes to the topic I just mentioned, the topic we want to be discussing throughout the day. Now, please join me in welcoming my very dear friend and moderator for the opening segment, Venus Yegan, who is the Secretary General of Rehabilitation International. Mr. Yegan, well, she is Mrs. Yegan. She's a global, not yet Mr. She's a global known leader in the disability community. Her very, very extensive experience in disability rights, promotion, and advocacy, as well as policy programming in humanitarian actions and building up the resilience of societies at national, regional, and global level is unique. So, Venus, the floor is yours now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bass, and thank you to all. My organization, Rehabilitation International, which has done work in disability and rehabilitation for 95 years since 1922, is very honored to participate in today's celebration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. We are a global organization of persons with disabilities, service providers, agencies of governments, academics, researchers, and advocates, working to improve the life of persons with disabilities. Central to the work that we do is the inclusion of persons with disabilities in humanitarian action, disaster risk reduction, and accessible urban development, as earlier referred to by Ms. Bass, among other things. We just had 2 weeks ago a regional meeting with disability leaders and others working in the field of disability and rehabilitation in Africa, held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to discuss possible collaboration for some future initiatives of RI for the Africa region. With that said, Rehabilitation International is looking forward to continue the work we have done over 9 decades and to play a proactive role as a member of civil society and to promote the rights and help achieve our shared goals for persons with disabilities across the world. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. And now I will have to explain some of the things that we need to do this morning before we start with this. Okay. 1 minute to 10. Okay. Yes. So we have 1 minute for accessible explanations from some of the representatives in the room today.
So thank you, sorry. I would like to ask maybe my colleagues in the GICM to spend 1 minute about the Accessible Center in the United Nations. I'm really sorry, Venus. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Just a brief note to let you know that the Accessibility Center is located on this floor in room S1B32, and it's right next to the escalators if you want to stop by. If you have any questions regarding the services or the devices we provide, feel free to stop by. We'll be happy to answer any questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. And now we will have to hear the speeches of our honorable guests this morning. But before we do that, we just want to inform everyone that we have set a maximum of 7 minutes for each of the speakers. Okay, so now, ladies and gentlemen, my task as the moderator for today. And let me inform you that the Secretary General, His Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, is not able to join us for today's event due to his very tight schedule. The Secretary General's message on the International Day of Persons with Disabilities is available online, and copies are going to be made available at the back of the room. So without further ado, may I invite the President of the 72nd session of the General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Miroslav Lasiak, I hope I pronounce your name right, sir, to open the first segment of the opening and deliver his remarks for the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. Your Excellency, please.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. Let me at the outset congratulate the organizers and sponsors of this event for bringing us together to celebrate this important occasion. The International Day of Persons with Disabilities was declared 25 years ago. And we can agree that as an international community, we have come a long way. We have made landmark achievements over this period. The most important being the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. That means full and effective participation and inclusion in society. And yet, on this International Day, we recognize that there is much more left to be done. We must continue to strive to leave no one behind, and this includes persons with disabilities. The 2030 Agenda calls for a people-centered approach to sustainable development. In this spirit, I have put a focus on people at the core of my presidency. And if I look around this room, it may appear that persons with disabilities are included and well represented. But outside these halls, the reality is quite different. Persons with disabilities are often disproportionately affected by poverty. They face discrimination and exclusion. Every day, they face challenges that affect their lives, that hamper their ability to contribute equally to the life of our societies. And this is not only a violation of their rights, it's a loss for our society and its diversity. This is why specific references in the targets of 2030 Agenda and other development frameworks are so important. We need to make the empowerment of persons with disabilities a priority at both the global and national levels. Persons with disabilities must be included and participate in the crafting of development plans and policies. We must reflect their concerns and situations from start to finish, ensuring that they are both accessible and enabling. Today's commemoration is therefore both timely and welcomed. We at the United Nations have work to do. During the general debate, I was confronted with how ill-equipped the General Assembly Hall is for persons with disabilities. And this was further reinforced when I gave a tour to a young person from my country, Slovakia, in a wheelchair. When we got to the General Assembly podium, it was inaccessible to her. These two examples beg the question: are we excluding persons with disabilities from equal participation in the work and leadership of the General Assembly? The second point is that the United Nations must stand as a role model. When policies and agreements are being discussed, when decisions are being made, they must be inclusive and respect the interests and rights of persons with disabilities. And persons with disabilities must themselves participate in these and other discussions. It is a fact that there is progress in some areas. Physical access within the UN premises has improved. We are thankful for the Accessibility Center here in New York and those involved in its establishment in 2013. Work is also being done on publications, web pages, and digitalization of documents. In 2016, the Secretary General submitted the first report on the full realization of an inclusive and accessible United Nations for persons with disabilities. However, many of these measures have only been possible thanks to voluntary contributions. And there is still much more to do. Documentation can now be acquired in accessible formats, but we need to work towards having them in real time. Can we have better lighting and acoustics in the meeting rooms? How about sign language interpretation and closed captioning for official meetings? We should also examine our signage to ensure that they are well positioned for all users. These are kind of suggestions made by persons with disabilities, and they deserve our full consideration. The United Nations must represent everyone equally. I will be pushing towards making the General Assembly inclusive, not just of states, but of all people. So I want to state a public commitment today. I'm committed to championing accessibility issues during this session. I'm working towards having captioning and sign language for some of my key events, including on webcast. I'm currently evaluating the accessibility of my website, and I have appointed a focal point on accessibility in my office. Furthermore, I'll be actively engaging persons with disabilities in the discussions we have, including as panelists. Based on this, I'd like to identify further actions that can be implemented in the short and the longer term. I will work with member states, in particular the champions like you, to make further progress. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, to move forward, let me stress once again that partnership is a key. I count on your support and collaboration to advance this important effort. I wish you fruitful discussions, successful celebration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your remarks. It is very heartwarming for persons with disabilities to know of your commitment to advance disability rights and equalize opportunity to all persons, including those with disabilities, plus the assurance that more can be expected in terms of proactive action towards the realization and enjoyment of the rights of persons with disabilities, 1 billion of us across the world. Thank you very much, sir. So now may I invite His Excellency Mr. Gorgi Panayotov, Permanent Representative of Bulgaria and President of the Bureau for the Conference of States Parties on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, to review the progress made and to highlight contributions from the Conference of States Parties to the promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities and the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Ambassador Panayotov, please.
Thank you very much, Ms. Moderator. Excellencies, dear colleagues, distinguished guests, on today's important occasion, when we mark the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, I would like to encourage all of us to use this opportunity to reaffirm our strong commitment to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. As President of the Conference of the States Parties to the CRPD, I am determined to further advance the human rights of persons with disabilities and to promote the full implementation of the Convention. The CRPD is the first international human rights convention of the 21st century, and in the 11 years since its adoption, the CRPD has also become one of the most quickly and widely ratified of all the international human rights treaties, with 175 states parties already, including one organization, the European Union. Our mission is to turn the firm commitments of states parties to promoting the rights of persons with disabilities into concrete actions and tangible results on the ground, ensuring that persons with disabilities enjoy all human rights and are included in society on an equal basis with others. To overcome the social barriers associated with disabilities and build sustainable and resilient societies for all, a transformative and inclusive approach is required that involves persons with disabilities as equal partners in all relevant processes at national and global levels. If we are to achieve inclusive and accessible societies and the realization of the human rights of all, we need to promote a human rights-based approach focused on supported rather than substituted decision-making by ensuring that persons with disabilities, through their representative organizations, participate and are included in decision-making processes that impact their lives. Over the years, the Conference of States Parties has become one of the largest and most important global forums on the rights of persons with disabilities, where the fruitful partnership with civil society and organizations of persons with disabilities is realized, setting the standard for how the UN member states, and persons with disabilities implement the core principles of the CRPD. The conference serves as a useful platform for states parties to share experience and best practices for the implementation of the Convention through various peer strategies, which contribute also to increasing the number of ratifications along with other mechanisms, including the Universal Periodic Review of the Human Rights Council. I encourage these practices as invaluable to our shared goal of reaching universal ratification. With our 10th Conference of States Parties earlier this year, we started the second decade of the CRPD with the ambition to further strengthen the implementation of the Convention by involving more actively persons with disabilities and their representative organizations from the initial stages of preparation of the conference through formulating the topics to actively participating in the discussions at all levels, including as speakers and co-chairs of meetings. The roundtable discussions during this year's conference focused on some of the most pertinent issues for persons with disabilities related to the implementation of some of the major global agreements of the last couple of years, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which for the first time has included and recognized persons with disabilities as agents of development, commitments in the humanitarian area and in the new urban agenda, the success of which would largely depend on how we engage persons with disabilities and take necessary action to empower them and ensure their full inclusion and participation. The conference explored the nexus between the rights of persons with disabilities and the ambition to build resilient societies, where no one is left behind, by promoting inclusive urban development and humanitarian action that takes into account the rights of the most vulnerable and marginalized in our societies. States parties reaffirmed the importance of the inclusion and active participation of persons with disabilities and their representative organizations in the design, implementation, coordination, monitoring, and evaluation of all relevant policies and programs, including in the areas of humanitarian and emergency action, disaster preparedness and response, and urban development. As we are now entering the final and crucial stage of the elaboration of the two global compacts for migration and on refugees, respectively, and considering the number of persons with disabilities among those on the move, particularly among those forcibly displaced by conflict and disaster, I find it imperative for us, as states parties to the CRPD, and for the international community in general, to reaffirm its commitment to the rights of persons with disabilities in the process of negotiations and consultations toward the adoption of those global agreements of paramount importance. Thank you for your attention.
I thank His Excellency, Mr. Gorgi Panayotov, Permanent Representative of Bulgaria, for his statement. We note with great appreciation the significant steps that have been taken by the international community to implement the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities since its adoption a decade ago, with a focus of ensuring equal opportunities for persons with disabilities in all aspects of life. 10 years after the CRPD's adoption and subsequent ratification and implementation, many things have been achieved, but a lot more needs to be done, and we count on your continued support going forward. Thank you, Your Excellency. May I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Finian Cheshire, Deputy Permanent Representative of New Zealand, who co-sponsored a resolution on women and girls with disabilities during the 72nd session of the General Assembly. Your Excellency, please.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. And can I start by thanking and acknowledging the President of the General Assembly for his statement just now and for his commitment to inclusiveness of persons with disabilities. We see it as a particularly welcome and strong step towards improving this organization's approach to persons with disabilities. As Vanessa just mentioned, New Zealand, along with our colleagues in Mexico and Sweden, present a biannual resolution on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to the General Assembly. And this year, for the first time, it was presented with a specific theme, that of the situation of women and girls with disabilities. We did so to acknowledge, and I believe in part this gets to the theme of today's event, that inclusiveness and a sustainable and resilient society for all cannot be achieved without specifically addressing the multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination that are faced by women and girls with disabilities. These multiple and intersecting forms limit the ability of women and girls with disabilities to enjoy human rights on an equal basis with others. The SDGs cannot be achieved without recognizing and addressing these specific challenges, and these specific challenges cannot be addressed without including women and girls in the preparation of policies and responses to these challenges. It is our experience, and I believe the experience of many member states, that the situation of women and girls with disabilities is often not considered in the development of gender and disabilities policies and programs, which means their specific challenges remain unaddressed or ignored. And for this reason, we welcome the changes proposed by the PGA towards inclusiveness in the discussions here on persons with disabilities. The resolution this year focuses on the core challenges facing women and girls with disabilities to the enjoyment of their rights on an equal basis with others, and it provides concrete actions that can be undertaken in this regard. Actively taking steps to improve the outcomes for women and girls in all areas of life must be a priority for us all. In particular, there is an urgent need to implement legislation, policies, and programs aimed at ensuring women and girls with disabilities have equal access to education and employment, access to healthcare services, including sexual and reproductive health, as well as access to justice and equal recognition before the law on an equal basis with others. Article 4.3 of the CRPD is critical to realizing today's themes, that best practices should be aimed at removing barriers and actively involving women and girls through their representative organizations in the discussions so that their perspectives are incorporated in the development of any policies and practices. We have in New Zealand begun to make small steps towards this, but we recognize that, as for all member states, it is an ongoing process, and for that reason we welcome this events like it, and the regular opportunity to discuss these issues as a community here at the United Nations. I should emphasize that accessibility as a precondition for the full and effective participation of persons with disabilities is not limited to access to the physical environment, but also includes the provision of information in accessible and alternative formats, an issue addressed again in this morning's discussions already. One particular issue that I want to highlight as I end my short comments here is that the collection of disaggregated data is critical to ensuring that no one is left behind in the implementation of Agenda 2030. The collection of quality data is fundamental in developing evidence-based programs that can meaningfully address multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. Without this, women and girls with disabilities risk being left behind or ignored. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your remarks. We acknowledge with appreciation your country's commitment in proactively raising awareness on the need to address the multifaceted discrimination faced by women and girls with disabilities every day of their lives, and your call for measures to be put in place to recognize their rights to combat stereotypes, prejudice, and harmful practices. Thank you indeed. And we would like to thank our speakers and move to the second segment of the opening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I am pleased to open the second segment of the opening for the 2017 International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And I invite representatives from the permanent missions who have subsequently contributed to the inclusion and promotion of persons with disabilities in the context of transformation towards sustainable and resilient society for all in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I guess everyone is in the podium, so thank you. May I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Feridun Şirniryoglu, Permanent Representative of Turkey, the organizer of the World Humanitarian in Istanbul, to make his statement. Sir, I hope I pronounce your name right. If not, apologies.
Thank you, Excellencies, distinguished participants. I would like to join others in thanking UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs for organizing today's event on the occasion of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. I hope that today's discussions will yield a valuable opportunity for fruitful deliberations on the promotion and protection of the rights of people with disabilities. This year's theme, focusing on transformation towards sustainable and resilient society for all, is particularly relevant. Persons with disabilities, as both beneficiaries and agents of change, have an important role to play in achieving inclusive and sustainable development and promoting a resilient society for all. This is pertinent for various situations, including in the context of disaster risk reduction and humanitarian action, as well as urban development. Today, as I was asked to address the need to foster disability-inclusive humanitarian action, I will focus my remarks on this very crucial matter. Distinguished participants, unfortunately, the multiple crises and challenges we collectively face around the world today have resulted in dramatic levels of humanitarian need. Forced displacement remains at record levels, with more than 65 million people displaced due to human-made crises or natural disasters. Persons with disabilities are often disproportionately affected in situations of risk. These include armed conflicts, humanitarian emergencies, and the occurrence of natural disasters and their aftermath. Ensuring the protection and safety of persons with disabilities in situations of risk is a moral responsibility for the international community. It is also a legal obligation for all states, parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Article 11 of the Convention speaks explicitly in this regard. Distinguished participants, last year, in May 2016, the international community came together in Istanbul for the first ever World Humanitarian Summit. We collectively sought viable ways and means to overcome the humanitarian tragedy our world is facing. The summit brought together over 9,000 participants representing 180 member states, including 55 heads of state and government, hundreds of civil society organizations and partners, including the private sector and academia. In its 70 years, the United Nations has rarely, if not never, convened at this scale with this many different stakeholders to deliberate on the pressing challenges that are resulting in so much suffering. At this summit, member states and other stakeholders announced commitments and initiatives to drive change and reduce human suffering. The issue of ensuring disability-inclusive humanitarian action was among the key themes that was discussed at the summit. Participants deliberated on this important topic in several roundtables and sessions, including at the special session dedicated to the inclusion of persons with disabilities into humanitarian action. The adoption of the Charter on Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in Humanitarian Action was a concrete outcome of these discussions. Distinguished participants, although the World Humanitarian Summit raised awareness and gave considerable momentum to the discussions on disability-inclusive humanitarian action, challenges remain and more work needs to be done. At this point, I would like to share some of our national experiences. Turkey hosts the largest refugee population in the world, with over 3.3 million people who have fled to Turkey from the devastation and conflicts in their countries. 3.1 million of them are Syrians. We continue to provide for the humanitarian, health and education needs of all those who are under temporary protection in our country. This includes persons with or without disabilities. By regulation, all foreign nationals with disabilities that hold a legal residence permit in Turkey and meet the eligibility criteria for care services are entitled to benefit from the same institutional care services provided to Turkish citizens. So far, over 6,200 Syrians under temporary protection in Turkey have been registered as persons with disabilities. Just as one example, in 2016 alone, 125 electric-powered wheelchairs were provided to those Syrians in need. One of the challenges that we encounter in providing for the specific needs of those with disabilities is the difficulty in gathering appropriate data. Presently, our authorities are carrying out a data updating project. Through this project, we aim to have a more precise picture of the needs of persons with disabilities. Last but not least, I would like to mention that we also prioritize on the work for the resettlement of those persons with specific needs to third countries. Needless to say, these efforts can only yield meaningful results if third countries step up their responsibilities and join us in our efforts in assisting the persons with disabilities in need. Distinguished participants, in concluding, I wish to underscore that persons with disabilities affected by crises all around our world require and deserve adequate access to humanitarian assistance. Safety and respect for the dignity of persons with disabilities in such circumstances must be a priority. Progress towards principled and effective humanitarian action cannot be realized if humanitarian preparedness and response excludes persons with disabilities. We must also keep in mind that we need to closely consult with and actively involve persons with disabilities in the design, planning and implementation of disability-inclusive humanitarian programs. Sharing of experiences, cooperation and coordination between all actors is critical in this regard. Allow me to finish by reiterating Turkey's commitment to leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. Persons with disabilities, as persons with disabilities, we acknowledge as one of the many great outcomes of the World Humanitarian Summit held in your country is the Charter of Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in Humanitarian Action, as you have just described. But we would also want to stress the fact that accessibility, humanitarian action, and urban infrastructure for all is for all, not only for persons with disabilities, but also for those people who acquire disabilities due to natural disasters and human causes. So thank you so much, and we appreciate your statement. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite His Excellency Ambassador Mr. Diego Fernando Morejon Pazmino, Permanent Representative of Ecuador, organizer of the Habitat 3 Conference in Quito, to deliver his statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to join to congratulate you and DESA, and Daniela Vaz and DESA, for organizing this meeting. Dear colleagues, thank you for being here. I would like to recognize too the presence of Ambassador Luis Gallegos. He is the former permanent representative of Ecuador. He's a special person who's dealing with the convention as a frame, as a concept, and in the action. So I'm very glad to see my colleague and friend here in this meeting. Dear friend and colleagues on the table, I would like to join the statement from Mr. Lakjak, the PGA, on telling the difficulties that we have here at the United Nations in the frame of accessibility. We experienced that, of course, as a country, with our president who came to the General Assembly this year. He's a disabled person himself, so we dealt with DGACM and other bodies here at the UN in order to have him here comfortable and to feel him well, as it should be. Another thing that I join is that we have to make it very visible. This convention must be in the best higher level. We should have this meeting in the General Assembly in a G193 basis. We have to go along with that to reach this thing. It's a global problem. Since 1992, the International Day of Persons with Disabilities is marked annually around the world on December the 3rd to promote awareness and mobilize support for critical issues pertaining to the inclusion of persons with disabilities in society and development. The joint effort of the international community in the promotion and protection of their rights has proven fruitful, and several landmarks have been reached since then. This year, we have again the opportunity to take stock and analyze how our commitments as member states, international community, civil society, and partners have been implemented towards the improvement of the quality of life of 1 billion people with disabilities around the world. And for that, I would like to share with you how Ecuador has taken on these commitments. As hosts of the United Nations Conference on Housing and Sustainable Urban Development, Habitat 3, which took place in Quito, Ecuador in October 2016, I have been asked to share our experiences and best practices of a disability-inclusive urban agenda, but if you allow me, I will briefly refer to how the transformation towards sustainable and resilient society for all took place in my country. As you're probably well aware, the government of Ecuador declared action and policy on disabilities as state priority in 2007. When our current president and then vice president took office, himself a person with a disability, President Lenín Moreno, decided to launch a mission called what the situation was for persons with disabilities, provide them with technical aids and health care, at the same time devise a strategy for improving the quality of life of people with disabilities as both beneficiaries and agents of change, together with their families and communities as part of our national development plan. Our strategy seeks to build inclusive communities where persons with disabilities are key actors in the political, economical, social, and cultural life. The challenge then was to develop a plan for persons with disabilities because everything was needed and everything was to be done, as persons with disabilities had been the poorest of the poor, the most marginalized. Today, the efforts under our current administration have evolved to what we call Plan Toda una Vida, which is a comprehensive plan that has the human being as its center from the time of birth until death, with a special focus in priority groups, including persons with disabilities, with the main goal of providing equal access and opportunities for our citizens to their life, of course. More specific initiatives includes the relaunching of the so-called plan mission Manuela Espejo, that has just started brigades to visit every corner of Ecuador to reevaluate the situation of persons with disabilities in Ecuador and fine-tune our national disability plan and the urban development programs Casa para Todos, or House for All, and the program Juntos por Ti, Together for You. The first one seeks to guarantee accessible, affordable housing for all, and the latter was developed specifically for persons with disabilities and their families who were affected by the earthquake that struck our coast in 2016. What I would like to highlight today, and in reference to the topic I was asked to address, is that all this is being done in an inclusive, participatory process. Built environment, ICTs, mobility, and transport have been done through consultative committees with representatives from the government, national and local industry, academia, experts, end users, following the call of nothing about is without us. Nothing about us is without us. We have also started a pilot project for training accessible tourism and have developed an accessible tourism national guide. I want to make a special emphasis on the new urban agenda, as it is our shared vision of what some national and local governments call the right to the city, as a principle to guarantee the enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms to decent housing and full access to public spaces, promoting democratic values of peace and justice. We still have great challenges ahead of us to work towards an inclusive society, promoting and protecting the rights of persons with disabilities and their full inclusion in societies that are truly societies for all, and we hope that we can continue to address those challenges together. In that regard, I reiterate the commitment of the government of Ecuador to continue promoting and developing adequate measures that facilitate the access of persons with disabilities on an equal basis with everyone to the spaces of the cities, in particular public spaces, transportation services, housing, education and health, communication and technologies, as well as other public services, leaving no one behind, but furthermore, putting forward those who need it the most. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your remarks. Urbanization is a major driver of development and poverty reduction, particularly in the context of persons with disabilities. The lack of access impedes our participation, which contributes greatly to our marginalization. We hope that the commitment of the international community to advance accessibility and mainstream disability in development, which are among the commitments made during Habitat 3, which was sponsored by your country, will finally enable persons with disabilities to live better quality lives and for us to be able to enjoy our rights on equal basis with others. Thank you very much, sir. Now I wish to invite His Excellency Ambassador Mr. Toshiya Hishino, Deputy Permanent Representative of Japan, organizer of the 3rd UN World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in Sendai, to deliver his statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ms. Venus Yegan, and ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor to deliver this opening statement as a co-sponsor of this event commemorating the International Day of Persons with Disabilities. I wish to extend my appreciation to my fellow co-sponsors, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and all involved in the dedicated efforts to prepare this event. Today, we take up this very important subject of transformation towards sustainable and resilient society for all. And the resilience is required the most in time of disaster and crisis. And every year, 200 million people suffer and more than $100 billion are lost due to natural disasters. And we should realize that persons with disabilities face particular challenges in disaster situations. Multiple barriers exist for them to access necessary assistance. It is reported that the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami in March 2011, the fatality rate of persons with disabilities was almost twice as high as the overall rate of affected residents. Based on lessons learned from this tragedy and assuring the safety of persons with disabilities in disaster situations, this is a matter of utmost importance. This year, the world has suffered from numerous natural disasters, including hurricanes, large-scale landslides, and earthquakes. And convening this event and discussing disability inclusive disaster risk reduction is very timely. The government of Japan has prioritized the protection and promotion of the rights of the persons with disabilities in situations of risk and humanitarian emergencies. As the moderator said, Japan hosted the 3rd UN World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in 2015. And worked hard for the adoption of what we call Sendai Framework 2015 to 2030, which emphasizes the role of persons with disabilities as important stakeholders in disaster risk reduction. In April 2016, after the adoption of Sendai Framework, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake hit the Kyushu region in southwest Japan. I would like to introduce 3 examples of measures our country took for victims with disabilities. First, it normally takes 3 to 10 days for care workers to enter the affected area and provide necessary assistance. The government distributed a simple leaflet which included information on how to assist persons with disabilities to enable neighbors in their community to help themselves or help them. And second, getting appropriate and timely information is very important during disaster situation. The government therefore introduced some smartphone applications which use voice recognition technology and can work offline as communication tools for persons with auditory disabilities. Third, the government took into consideration the special needs of persons with disabilities when making guidelines for the operation of shelters and securing welfare, evacuation shelters, and toilets. It is important to be prepared for natural disasters in order to act quickly. Local governments are compiling a list of persons who cannot seek refuge by themselves during a disaster or when there is a risk of disaster, and sharing this information with relevant authorities. International cooperation, including technical assistance for developing countries in the area of disaster risk reduction, is another important element of the Sendai framework. In line with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, Japan has contributed to the effort of the international community to realize the right of the person with disabilities and the promotion of an equal and inclusive society. Now, I'd like to introduce two practical examples of Japan's contribution. First, like Japan, the Philippines are often hit by tropical storm. Japan has assisted municipal governments in the Philippines with including persons with disabilities when making a disaster reduction plan and mapping those who may need help during a disaster. This project enabled persons with disabilities to themselves contribute to assistance effort in a disaster situation. And second, I'd like to raise a case of Ecuador. Persons with disabilities are often excluded from access to TV broadcasting, which is a major source of information during disaster. So in Ecuador, Japan is now conducting a project on a deployment of accessible TVs for persons with visual and auditory disabilities. Article 11 of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities stipulates that state parties shall take all necessary measures to ensure the protection and safety of persons with disabilities in situations of risk, humanitarian emergencies, and the occurrence of natural disasters. Realizing disability-inclusive disaster risk reduction is an important theme for the next decade of the convention. Japan will proudly host the Tokyo Paralympic Games in 2020. Leading up to the important event, Japan is making use of universal design and information and communication technologies to build a society which is resilient to disasters. I'd like to conclude by reiterating that Japan will continue to support the participation and inclusion of persons with disabilities in all situations, including those of risk and natural disasters. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. We note with appreciation that the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction had referenced disability directly and incorporated explicit recommendations towards a disability-accessible and inclusive environment not evident in previous similar initiatives. This means a lot for millions of persons with disabilities who are most vulnerable and often disproportionately affected in times of disasters, emergencies, and conflict situations. We thank your country's consistent support for disability and persons with disabilities. Now, may I invite His Excellency Ambassador Mr. Park Chul-ju, Deputy Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea, to deliver his statement.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, for offering me a floor. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank UNDESA for organizing this event. It's my pleasure and honor to take part in this annual celebration of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which is a very meaningful opportunity to renew our commitment toward sustainable and resilient society for all. Considering the series of international milestones on the issue of disabilities in recent years, renewing our commitment is all the more important. In addition to our foundational blueprints, including the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we now have specific references to disability in Sendai Framework for disaster risk reduction and new urban agenda. Many countries, including the Republic of Korea and the relevant humanitarian agencies, have also endorsed the Charter on Inclusion of Persons with Disability in Humanitarian Action launched in May 2016 in Istanbul. These recent developments have further elevated disability as an essential component in addressing disaster risk reduction, urban development, and humanitarian actions. As such, focus should now be placed on how to transform our commitment into concrete realities. In this regard, I hope today's panel discussion will provide us with timely input and suggestions to realize inclusive society and development. The Republic of Korea, for its part, will continue its contribution to promoting and protecting the rights of persons with disability around the world. Given the estimate that 80% of the world's persons with disabilities are living in developing countries, there is a clear linkage between development and disability. In accordance with its Framework Act on International Development Cooperation, Korea will contribute to create and implement its development programs that focus on promoting the rights of persons with disability. The Republic of Korea also supports a more inclusive and accessible United Nations. Leading by example in this area, the UN is able to reaffirm humanity's faith in fundamental human rights and in the dignity and worth of each person as envisaged in its charter. Stemming from this belief, the Republic of Korea, together with Antigua Barbuda, Brazil, Italy, Poland, and Tanzania, jointly tabled UN General Assembly Resolution 70/170 in 2015, entitled Towards the Full Realization of an Inclusive and Accessible United Nations for Persons with Disability. Building upon this important resolution and other relevant commitments, the UN Secretariat, member states, society, civil society, and other key stakeholders should join forces to ensure inclusivity and accessibility in the United Nations. Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, before closing, I would like to underscore the importance of realizing the potentials of persons with disabilities. They are right holders as well as agents of development, playing an essential part in building the future we envision. In this respect, the Republic of Korea attaches utmost importance to having a successful and peaceful Winter Paralympic Games from March 9 to 18 next year in Pyeongchang of my country. We hope that the Paralympic Games will showcase the ambition, talent, and drive of those with disabilities while simultaneously inspiring the wider world. I would also like to ask for your kind attention to the musical performances and statement which will immediately follow this opening session. The performers and the speaker are Korean youth with developmental disabilities, filled with dreams and hopes. I'm sure that listening to them will allow all of us in this room to catch a glimpse of a more inclusive and sustainable future that has not yet arrived, but we are striving to make it together. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. And we would like to thank Korea, the Republic of Korea, for having given a generous contribution to establish the Accessible Center or Accessibility Center here in the United Nations. They also sponsored the resolution on making the UN premises accessible, as has been mentioned. And in a more recent resolution supported on sports, they supported the inclusion of Paralympics for persons with disabilities. Thank you very much indeed. And last but not least, may I now request Ms. Penny Hartin, Chief Executive Officer of the World Blind Union, as representative of civil society organizations, to deliver her statement. Ms. Hartin, please.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is truly an honor for me to address you this morning at these opening ceremonies to commemorate the International Day for Persons with Disabilities. While I am here representing the World Blind Union, I also note that WBU is a founding core member of the International Disability Alliance, and we strongly believe in the importance of working together with other disabled persons organizations to achieve more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient societies. Indeed, it is through partnership and collaboration that we have achieved so much over the past years. Working together, we achieved the UN CRPD and disability inclusion in such global development agendas as the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the New Urban Agenda, and the Sendai Framework on Disaster Risk Reduction. Moreover, our success in advocating for the adoption of the Marrakesh Treaty to facilitate access to published works for persons who are blind, visually impaired, or otherwise print disabled illustrates how collaboration and advocacy for a common cause can result in international policy that can make a tangible difference for hundreds of millions of people with print disabilities. While these international instruments are important and helpful in confirming the imperative for inclusion of persons with disabilities in all aspects of society, they can only truly make a difference if they are fully embraced at the international, regional, national, and community levels through strong implementation and monitoring processes. The Marrakesh Treaty, for example, has now been ratified by 33 countries, which is very encouraging, and I want them all next year. However, unless the treaty is implemented through copyright legislation that reflects its spirit, it will miss the opportunity to actually make books accessible and available for people who are blind and print disabled. Similarly, if implementation and monitoring strategies for the SDGs do not include data disaggregation by disability as part of those strategies, then we will not be able to measure the impact that their implementation is having on the lives of people with disabilities. A key aspect in transforming societies to be sustainable and resilient for all is harnessing technology as a key driver and tool for such transformation. Technological advances have contributed enormously to enhancing education, employment, and community participation for all people with disabilities, and particularly for those of us who are blind or partially sighted, who benefit from more immediate and cost-effective access to Braille, document reading, wayfinding, and so forth. Personally, I probably have 10 apps on my iPhone that replace 10 different devices I used to carry around or have in my home. So technology has the opportunity to truly make a difference for independence and inclusion. Conversely, however, most technology is simply too expensive for most persons with disabilities, the majority of whom experience huge unemployment rates and a much higher rate of poverty than the general public, and for whom such devices are simply out of reach, either because they are inaccessible or unaffordable. So technology can offer a promise of increased inclusion, but only if we find ways to make it accessible and affordable. Another threat related to our technological advances is the lack of universal design to ensure accessibility is built in. This is particularly an issue for household appliances, self-serve kiosks, point-of-sale systems, all which tend to rely on touchscreens. Touchscreens can be made accessible if accessibility features have been incorporated into the design. After all, both Apple and Android have done it, and some others as well. But generally, manufacturers of household appliances simply have not considered how their devices may be used by those who are unable to use touchscreens. We likely all remember when silent cars first came on the market and celebrated the fact that there would be less noise in our environment. Unfortunately, no one really thought about what these silent cars would mean to independent travel for blind people who rely on hearing traffic patterns to cross the street safely. So after many years of advocacy at the International Standards Organization, we are finally agreeing on standards that would introduce a minimum sound that is detectable by pedestrians, including blind persons. This is a clear example of the impact of not considering the needs of persons with disabilities in planning and development, whether it be for products, infrastructure, or services. I also firmly believe that to build a fully inclusive, sustainable, and resilient society, it is essential to address the unique needs of women and girls with disabilities and undertake measures to ensure their full and equal participation. We are all too aware of the lack of access to education, accessible health care, and productive employment opportunities for women and girls with disabilities. We know that they are more subject to violence and abuse than either disabled men and boys or non-disabled women and girls. And we know that women and girls with disabilities who face humanitarian or disaster-related emergencies are particularly vulnerable due to lack of accessible infrastructure, adapted information, and insufficient planning and preparation to understand and meet their needs. So it is critical that all programs and services be planned and delivered to ensure access to and participation by women with disabilities, and that we be engaged in their planning and delivery. Furthermore, for that to happen in a meaningful way, women with disabilities must be encouraged and facilitated to assume leadership roles. It is our experience that there are few women with disabilities in leadership positions at any level. Particularly illustrative of this issue was that at the last CRPD committee elections held at the Conference of States Parties in 2016, no women were elected, and indeed at present only one of the 18 committee members is a woman. So clearly there is more work to be done to ensure that women with disabilities have the skills and opportunities to assume these leadership roles. 11 years after the adoption of the UN CRPD, much has been achieved to reduce barriers, change attitudes, and include people with disabilities in the global agenda that will influence participation and societal development. And given the rapid pace of technological advances that have both the opportunity to enhance inclusion and reduce exclusion, we must all be vigilant to maintain our achievements and that we continue to progress and prosper as all citizens in the world, including the more than 1 billion of us who have disabilities. My sincere thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Hartin, for your statement. On behalf of civil society, our collaborative work is important to realize our shared goals. World Blind Union, the International Disability Alliance, and many others contribute to ensuring that we will never be left behind again as the work to advance the Agenda 2030 continues at various levels. So at this juncture, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers, and that's it. That's the end of the opening segment. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I would like now to thank you, the President of the General Assembly, who left all the excellencies that have been with us and hopefully will keep being with us throughout the day, and of course the World Blind Union. And thank you very much, Venus, Ms. Liegan. It was extraordinary to have you here, as usual. we can feel the vibes in the room. So thank you very much for celebrating with us the International Day of Persons with Disabilities in the year 2017. By the way, I am Daniela Bass, and I am the Director of the Division for Social Policy and Development in the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. And the division, on behalf of the department, houses the focal points for the whole United Nations system on youth, aging, indigenous peoples, family, and persons with disabilities. So I'm very proud to be here and very honored somehow to contribute to the day. I would like just to mention this before we have the pleasure of benefiting of some entertainment. As it has been already announced, I would like to inform you that throughout the day, in the afternoon, we will keep talking about resilience, and we are going to talk about building the future societies, the societies we want. There will be a dialogue between the private and the public sector, and the second part of the afternoon will be discussing about the role of tourism. It's a major industry. And how tourism can contribute, actually, through infrastructures, etc., to make sure that the cities where tourism takes place and the urban areas where tourism takes place are well structured and organized to welcome everybody, and by contributing to have good infrastructures and much more than that, you will see what's going to happen, or hear what's going to happen in the afternoon. We make sure that the societies can be also resilient in case of natural disasters and much more than that. So you're most welcome to be part of the other events we have planned throughout the day. I would like to invite you to join us now and watch a short video which is entitled "A Missing Link: Transporting Children with Disabilities to School." I went through that 50 years ago, so I'm very, very interested to see what they're showing here and if it somehow relates to my personal experience as well. But besides that, what matters is that this has been prepared by Access Exchange International. And it's produced by the Broadcast and Electronic Communication Arts Department of San Francisco State University. And this is a gift to the cause of enabling children with disabilities to get to school in developing countries. Thanks again to all the panelists, and now let's watch this 5-minute video.
Es muy difícil llevar a una persona con discapacidad, subirla al transporte, es muy difícil.
Sí, hay muchos niños aquí en la comunidad que hace falta ir a la escuela, pero no los lleva porque no tienen con qué pagar para el transporte de ir a la escuela.
Pues sería bueno que hubiera un transporte especialmente para las personas con discapacidad, para que fuese un poco más fácil su trayecto.
De Iván me dan el resultado cuando él tiene 20 días de nacido. Él me dicen que tiene artrogriposis múltiple congénita.
Mi hijo se llama Roque Mateo Hernández. Está difícil porque ahorita yo le doy gracias a Dios que mi hijo ya camina, ya todo. Pues de repente cuando él cayó ya no se pudo mover, ya no se paraba. Se llama Diego Fernando Bautista Vélez. A veces lo llevo una semana, una vez a la semana. A veces no lo llevo, por falta el recurso.
Mi hija se llama Mayrani Yemilet Vázquez García y tiene microcefalia con atrofia cerebral.
Relacionado al transporte que utilizan los alumnos, muchos de ellos utilizan los colectivos, que son las combis que los traen desde su casa para acá y viceversa. Algunos se trasladan en taxi, algunos de ellos tienen que hacer el traslado caminando.
Aquí no hay transporte especializado para transportar a los discapacitados.
Gracias a la silla eléctrica que me desplazo desde mi casa hasta la escuela, más o menos un recorrido de 20 minutos.
Yo conocí a Iván cuando tuvo problemas así en subirse así en su silla de ruedas, la rampa tenía problemas, entonces yo le ayudé.
Sí, hay banqueta, pero no están aptas para que camine la silla eléctrica, entonces tenemos que caminar sobre la carretera.
Como ella pesa un poco y sí hay que irla cargando porque no camina, pues con eso batallo un poco.
Yo llego a la escuela con mi bicicleta.
En la mañana sí llevo a terapias y luego ya se va a la escuela. Pero sí me da miedo porque a veces va y no sé qué se puede hacer.
Pues yo creo que está un 40% de alumnos que tienen que quedarse en casa por falta de la economía, del traslado de otras partes, ¿verdad?
De aquí, de mi casa salgo a esperar el taxi. Y si no está el taxi, pues nos esperamos como media hora todavía.
Limpia más también. Y para hacer manjuigas para hacer taxi, pues una que más tome. Y pues
sí, me gustaría ya ver grande a mi hijo, ya verlo ahí, está enfrente de mí, que estuviera ahí. Que si no, quisiera que me apoyaran en eso.
pues, más que nada en el transporte. El transporte es el que le hace falta a los niños.
Que haya un transporte especializado con rampa para que él pueda hacerse independiente, que ya no dependa de mí, sino que sea ya él que vaya y que venga a donde él guste.
Yo quiero ser programador porque me llama la atención, aunque piensen los demás que eso es imposible. Para mí no existe lo imposible.
Pues para mí me da gusto de que él le da ganas de salir adelante.
Sí, es importante que nos ayudara con un transporte para los niños discapacitados, que vayan a la escuela, que despierten más, porque se es bien inteligentes, más inteligentes ellos.
Hay muchos discapacitados que realmente necesitan ayuda, que realmente están apartados de la civilización, que ellos quisieran que alguien les dijera, ¿sabes qué? Este es tu sueño, vamos a hacerlo. Es difícil al principio tener un hijo especial. En mi caso yo dije, yo quiero tener un hijo, pero uno nunca sabe cómo va a venir el hijo. Pero si yo decidí tener un hijo, yo lo acepté, yo dije, Dios mío, si me lo vas a dejar como viene, déjame. Yo voy a cuidar de él, yo no me voy a separar de él, yo voy a hacer todo lo posible por él. Pues yo lo que quiero es que mi hijo logre su sueño.
Very touchy video. Now, let's bring some music into our lives. And I would like to welcome 4 talented musicians from the Republic of Korea to the stage. Their musical performance will be followed by a speech from Mr. Bae Bom-jun. The performers were invited by the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Korea, and they are the Special Olympics Korea Ensemble, which consists, as I said, of 4 artists with the developmental disabilities, as already mentioned by the deputy earlier on. There is the flutist. My gosh, they really want to try me with these names that I'm so sorry, I'm not going to pronounce nicely. So the flutist is Kang Song-kang. The cellist is Park Se-jun. The clarinetist is Yo Seong-job. Somebody has to help me, I'm so sorry. And the tenor is, which we already had the pleasure of hearing earlier on at the beginning of this, of the opening of this day, is Yo Young-jun. So please join me in welcoming them with a warm applause. They are going to perform two pieces, a performance by flute, cello, clarinet trio, Divertimento in B flat major of Mozart, and then their performance by the tenor, Panis Angelicus. Thank you.
Merci.
I would like to thank very much the musicians and the singer. I would like also to inform you that there will be now another panel, actually the first panel of the three. The first panel of the three of today will be and is on persons with disabilities as agents of change. Lessons from disability inclusive disaster risk reduction and humanitarian action for resilient and sustainable cities. In the afternoon, the other two panels will follow on building future societies for all from 3 to 6 again in this room, where the public and the private sector will discuss about partnerships to positively impact the prosperity and well-being of vulnerable communities living in urban areas, and how the tourism industry can contribute to this, since this is also the International Year of Tourism. While the panelists are leaving the podium, and again, thank you very much, Excellencies, and colleagues and friends and the civil society representatives. Who? The guy from Korea, you know, that you already announced. He has to read his statement. So I would like to thank the agencies, the UN agencies, the civil society organization, the academia, for their support throughout the whole day, but also throughout the year. Before inviting the moderator of today's panel, I would like, though, to ask the Bojumbe to kindly spend a few words with us and for us. Thank you. While waiting for him to come to the podium, after his few comments, 2 videos will follow, and then the panel will start. I see already that on my side there is Ambassador Luis Gallego, but I will say who you are after the videos. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, how are you? My name is Bae Wang-jun. My nickname is Smile Angel. I'm Smile Angel Bae Wang-jun. I like cello. I love cello. I play peace with my beloved cello. I am 21 years old, and I am majoring in classical music at Baekseong University of Arts in South Korea. I am an intellectually disabled person. My intellectual ability is about 3 years old, but at the same time, I am a young man. I am a cool and healthy young man. I am a baby. I even have a beard growing on my face. What's more absurd is the looks people give me. People look at me like I am a fool. They see my shy face and call me an idiot. Sometimes they hit me or use my things without asking for permission. There are people that curse at me too. I am constantly insulted by people against my will. The most difficult and painful thing for me is when I see deleted of people who say they want to help. On the surface, they act as if they are helping out of goodwill. But actually, they use me for their benefit. No matter the right they tell us, we can sense their mood peace. People like that exploit our time and later, and if we do not do as they tell us, send train us to use violence against us and take away our jobs. I have gotten hit by strangers on the street. If strangers act you for no reason, would you would be afraid to go out? Would you not? I am almost got kidnapped 3 times in the daytime ever since. I cannot go out alone. My mom always comes with me wherever I go. I want my mom to live long and healthy. Everybody is kind to me when I am with mom, when I am alone, except for a few people who are nice to me. Most people tease and try to bury me. It is scary. Here I have something to say. People with intellectual disabilities are not babies. People with intellectual disabilities are not toys. People with intellectual disabilities are not disposable products that is used and discarded and needed. I have an intellectual disability, but I am a person. People, I am one of them. Those things you hate and avoid are things that you hate and wish to avoid as well. No one likes to be ignored or ridiculed. We all want to be loved and recognized. It's the same for us, except we need your patience. I may speak slow and my actions may be slow, but if you will wait, I can show you more possibilities. Will you give us your patience? Then I can show you my happy smile, which turn will bring a smile upon your face as well. And finally, Pyeongchang Olympics will be an Olympics. Please, show your greatest support to fans of Paralympics and come Paralympics and come join us in Pyeongchang next year as a chariot of peace. I will be watching for you with my beloved child. With a smile on my face, I didn't see anyone fall asleep during my long story. Thank you for listening. Shows my story with a warm smile. You must be angels. Thank you very so much.
Thank you, Bohm June. You brought a smile on our faces. Thank you to your smile. You brought energy and strength. The motivation to come to Korea next March, to applaud you there when you play the cello. And I would also like to applaud your mother. Thank you. So now join me to watch 2 short videos that are highlighting persons with disabilities as agents of change in society and in development. Include us from CBM Australia, followed by Message of Life from the Japan Disability Forum. Thank you.
With a disability and I live in poverty, my experience in discrimination is compounded.
Access to my community is so difficult for me.
Include me inside. How is it okay to commit rape without punishment? I have a name. Don't call me by my disability. We have contributions to make.
Mika, Japanese. My house.
I am an athlete, and through sports, I travel. I advocate for the rights of people with disability.
Through the business problem, support my community solely respect me.
Me from Bayutin strong. I can live independently.
Me like a sing al random.
This promise have grown out.
I'm a mother and a grandmother, and I'm a boss of my house.
I lead, I advocate, I won't let you stop us. Ensure women and girls with disabilities are included in all development efforts, so no one is left behind. No one left behind. Include us. Include me.
Include me.
Developmental disorder, psychiatric disorder, visual impairment, intellectual disability, orthopedic impairment, hearing impairment, deafblindness, internal disorder. I didn't know it at the time, since I cannot see, but according to those who could see, it looked like a sea of fire outside. After the shaking, the tsunami came, but I could not hear it. I'm giving up. Let me go now.
It is reported that in that earthquake, the mortality rate of disabled persons was twice that of the general victim population. Messages of life. Twice as many persons with disabilities passed away on March 11th.
I don't feel like applauding, honestly, but I would like to applaud to the producers that made an amazing, amazing small documentary. So let's start with the panel discussion. Let's start with the panel discussion, the first one. Persons with disabilities as agents of change, lessons from disability inclusive disaster risk reduction and humanitarian action for resilient and sustainable cities. I see the panelists already sitting on the podium, and I welcome Mr. Ambassador Luis Gallegos. Ambassador Gallegos was the chairman of the ad hoc committee on a comprehensive and integral international convention on the protection and promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities as well as their dignity from 2002 to 2005, has been also serving as the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Global Initiative for Inclusive ICTs. Ambassador Gallegos, with his comprehensive and extensive experience in the field of disability, has greatly contributed to the promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities and the transformation of societies into resilient, inclusive, and sustainable ones. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniela. I have to thank you because she's a good friend of mine. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here at this International Day of Persons with Disabilities and moderate this panel, this star panel, because we have very important actors in this panel. The first person I would like to invite is the program specialist from UNICEF, co-chair of the Interagency Standing Committee on the task team of inclusion of persons with disabilities and humanitarian action, to make her presentation. If you will, please.
It's on. Okay. Great. Thank you, Ambassador Gallegos. Thank you, Daniela. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Greetings from UNICEF. My name is Gopal Mitra. I work with UNICEF in the disability section. And greetings from all of us on the occasion of International Day of Persons with Disabilities. And our thanks to our colleagues in DESA for organizing this important panel. When I think of risk and resilience for persons with disabilities, first of all, what I feel good about is this issue has been gaining increasing importance over the last couple of years, which is great. But what evidence also suggests, and it's growing every day, and as we just saw in the video, that whether it's a cyclone or a tsunami or an earthquake or a context of forced displacement, children and adults with disabilities face disproportionate risk and adversity. Existing disparities and inequities heighten the impact of disasters, forced displacement, climate-related events on the most marginalized groups of the population, and children with disabilities are one of the worst impacted. We can have more studies, but it's unlikely to say us something different. But things need to change, and there are critical actions that we need to undertake urgently to bring about this change. Some of these actions are being taken. We have 5 minutes today to make our statement. So while there are a range of factors which need to be considered and actions which follow from them, I'll touch on 3 fundamental issues. The first is the involvement and the direct and full involvement of children and adults with disabilities in programs, interventions, planning around risk resilience and humanitarian action. The second is the urgent need to strengthen national data systems so that they are better able to capture the issues faced by children and adults with disabilities. And the third is the critical aspect of accessibility. Whether it's the CRPD, the SDGs, the Sendai framework, or discussions around the WHS last year where I was present, they highlight one or all of these points. Let me start with the most fundamental one, the direct involvement of children and adults with disabilities. Now, who is better able to identify the risk that you face than you yourself. As our friend just pointed out from the floor, children and adults with disabilities are uniquely placed to help identify the risks and be involved in designing solutions for them. We talk about risk-informed planning and decision-making, but that risk is informed by whom? Unless we are able to bring about this fundamental understanding and change and operationalize it into our programs, when we do a risk analysis or programming around risk and resilience, we will not go very far. Our experiences show that when we do, it makes a huge difference. Let me give you an example. In Nepal, for example, UNICEF had a partnership with the umbrella organization of persons with disabilities before the earthquake, and with several agencies working on children with disabilities. So once the earthquake hit, within the first few days, with the help of the national DPO as well as disability-focused NGOs, we could identify more than 5,000 children with disabilities who could later be linked to programs and services. As a part of the school preparedness program in Nepal itself, UNICEF reached out to schools where children with disabilities were studying, both specific schools for children with disabilities as well as regular schools. And in one of the schools, just to give you an example, after the earthquake, none of the children with disabilities were injured or killed. So it has a positive impact, and we know that, and we cannot do more of it, and this is fundamental. Second point is on data. Unless national data systems capture how many children and adults with disabilities they are, where they are, and they're counted, we cannot systematically include persons with disabilities. To be counted, we need to count persons with disabilities. National data systems have to do much, much better. UNICEF, in collaboration with the Washington Group, has developed the child functioning module, household survey data module. And we hope that this will significantly contribute to strengthening data on persons with disabilities. As we speak, UNICEF is holding a workshop on strengthening data in West Africa, where several national statistical offices and UN partners are right now discussing on how to strengthen national data systems on disability. And it's not only household survey data. We need to strengthen administrative data also, education management information systems, and so on. We have piloted guidance on how to strengthen that, and it has been working well. So there are tools available, and they need to be incorporated into data systems. The last point is on accessibility. Ladies and gentlemen, accessibility or the lack of it has a direct and a significant bearing on the risk and resilience of persons with disabilities. If we are building a school or a community center, and if that is not accessible, when the flood hits or an earthquake happens or a tsunami happens, and these facilities are used as evacuation centers, we don't need to be very, very informed and technical to know that persons with disabilities, children and adults, will not be able to access these places. If we are building early warning systems which do not take into account accessibility of people, of children who cannot see or hear or communicate effectively, then we cannot expect these early warning systems to work for persons with disabilities. At the same time, we know if we plan accessibility from the design stage, it doesn't cost significantly more. There is evidence which suggests that. At UNICEF, we have incorporated accessibility into our core procurement processes so that systematically we can ensure that accessibility is taken into account, monitored, and implemented and quality assured throughout each stage of the process. We have enough barriers in the world. Let's not spend any resource to create new barriers. Let's spend the resources to create accessible, enabling environments for all. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will greatly help to reduce risk and build resilience of persons with disabilities. At UNICEF, we remain committed to working with all of you. And with this, I thank you for your attention. And I hand over the floor to the chair. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Gopal. We completely agree with you. Persons with disabilities have to be included in the programming stages and the implementation stages of any measures taken in relation to them, and more so in disaster risk reduction. I now give the floor to Ms. Margaret Arnold, Senior Social Development Specialist from the World Bank, to deliver her presentation. Please keep track of the time. It's 5 minutes, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you for inviting me here. It's a real pleasure to be here to talk about this important topic. I wanted to use my few minutes to reflect on a couple of the questions that were posed to us as panelists, which is what are the goals and objectives of disability inclusion in disaster risk management, and the roles and the specific actions that we can take. So I'll give you a couple of minutes on the goals from my perspective at the World Bank and share with you what we're trying to do to advance disability inclusion, particularly in disaster and climate risk management. So first, what does social inclusion, why does it matter to the World Bank? Our goals are to end extreme poverty and boost shared prosperity. And this means dealing with the more than 1 billion people that still live in deep poverty, and also addressing the rising inequality and social exclusion that accompanies economic growth in many countries. Persons with disabilities make up 15% of the world's population. 80% of them live in developing countries, and 80% of those live in abject poverty. They're often excluded from services, tend to have lower levels of education attainment and employment. So the inclusion of persons with disabilities is directly related to the goals of our work at the World Bank. And I'll just note that the way we're defining social inclusion at the bank is the process of improving the ability, opportunity, and dignity of people disadvantaged on the basis of their identity to take part in society. So that's taking part in markets, housing, labor, credit markets, services, and spaces, political spaces, physical spaces, and cultural spaces. So why is all this important to disaster risk management? You saw the videos, you can see the importance of it. A flood or earthquake, the phenomenon may not discriminate, but people certainly do, both intentionally and unintentionally. And we know that what makes any natural event become a disaster is socially constructed for the most part. Disasters disproportionately impact the poor, women, children, elders, persons with disabilities, or any group that experiences a higher level of exclusion from society. We know that relief and recovery processes can increase or reinforce existing inequalities. In the cases of persons with disabilities, we know that they're more likely to be left behind or abandoned during evacuation in disasters or conflicts. Temporary shelters and relief camps are frequently inaccessible. They may be unable to access food and water distribution centers. They may not receive warnings, have we seen. And we may miss important opportunities to rebuild our physical spaces and organize ourselves in a more inclusive way going forward. So how can we ensure that this doesn't happen? We need to always look at disasters through that social lens and use vulnerability as our starting point. And we need to remember that communities, organized communities, have their own expertise, as we just heard from Gopal, their own expertise in managing risk based on their lived experience. And recognizing and supporting that expertise and helping to foster constructive relationships between communities and their local and national authorities is crucial to spreading and scaling up these efforts. And we also need to remember that communities are not homogeneous. They're heterogeneous, and there may be exclusion within groups. So taking the time to identify and empower those that may be excluded can go a long way to strengthening resilience. If we keep treating marginalized people as passive beneficiaries of assistance, which so often happens, we miss out on the perspective and experience that they offer. I'll give you one quick example from a project we're supporting that started in Japan. It focuses on elders, but there's a lot of overlap because many of them have physical and cognitive disabilities. So in Ofunato, Japan, after the 2011 earthquake and tsunami, elder community members did not want to be treated as passive beneficiaries. They organized and worked with the community to plan and build the Ibasho Cafe, which serves as a hub to restore the fabric of the community that was badly damaged by the disaster. It's an informal gathering place. It also functions as a sustainable business. You can buy a cup of coffee, a cup of tea there. It brings the community together. All generations connect in this space. Older people teaching younger people how to make traditional foods, younger people teaching elders how to navigate computer software, et cetera, et cetera. The elders actively engage in the operation of the cafe, and it helps to build social capital and resilience, while at the same time changing people's mindsets about aging and about disabilities. They've been running as a business for several years. They've developed a noodle shop, an organic farm, and have really served to strengthen the longer-term resilience of this community. So we became aware of this case at the World Bank and worked with the organization to study and evaluate what the impact of this was on the community's well-being and on social capital. And we're now supporting the replication of this in Nepal after the earthquake and in the Philippines after Typhoon Haiyan. Now, this is one relatively small example, and at the bank, we invest billions of dollars in broader community-driven development, in disaster and climate risk management, and in urban development and many other sectors. And what we're trying to do is work towards making sure that those investments promote social inclusion as part of resilience and sustainable development goals, because they are one and the same. So in the area of disaster risk management, we're really at the beginning of this process. And rather than support a broad social inclusion approach, we're taking a specific focus on persons with disabilities because this has been identified as a special gap and priority. We've done a lot of work on the role of women, the role of different groups in managing risk, but we feel that persons with disabilities are another important area to address. So where we are at is that we've engaged with experts that work in this space to do a review of practice at the global level, to identify what is good practice, and then look at our own work and our role as working through national governments and through our financial and technical assistance to see what is the value added that we can bring to advance this important agenda at scale. We have a first draft of the report, and it came up with a very long list of recommendations, which we are now digesting, and we'll have further consultations with the experts and practitioners so that we can identify a practical way forward on this area. So I hope to come back to you in the near future with more examples on how we're engaging and empowering persons with disabilities in this area, so that not only are their needs met and their rights protected, but they're playing a leadership role in strengthening resilience that benefits everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Margaret. You have pointed out that disability is an issue which I would like to define as you are either born with a disability or you acquire it during your life for whatever, by sickness, by accident, by climate change, by malnutrition, by many other issues. But certainly as we age, we will be disabled. So this is not only about a minority, this is about all of us. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I would like to call on Hiroshi Kawamura, my good friend, and who is doing outstanding work on the issue of accessibility and technology. Please, Hiroshi.
Thank you, Ambassador. I would like to focus on the key elements for disability inclusion in disaster risk reduction, which is the accessible and easy to understand information for knowledge and skills. I'd like to see, okay, next slide, please. Okay. So as there is a cycle of the disaster risk management, but it is most important moment when disaster happens. Just before disaster happens, we get early warning. It's essential for people with disabilities for survival. And people with disabilities must evacuate immediately after getting the early warning. The evacuation could be successful when it is started in the right moment with the right decision making of people with disabilities themselves. And it will be followed by the first response, and a successful survival will be followed by the rehabilitation process, and then Build Back Better process will guide us to the next stage of the preparedness development for the next early warning for early evacuation. So this cycle will enable us to develop more inclusive and resilient community. Next slide, please. In order to make it happen successfully, there are three elements: people, policy, and science and technology. Next slide, please. People includes all stakeholders which will provide, who will provide specific knowledge and pragmatic guidance according to the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. Next slide, please. Policy. We have already developed a very good policy guidance. Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which is very comprehensive. New Urban Agenda, Sendai framework of disaster risk reduction, and of course, Sustainable Development Goals. Those are excellent policy guidance. Next slide, please. Okay, science and technology is very important. First, development of scientific knowledge on risks, and this will give us the sharing of accessible and easy to understand knowledge on disasters. Then it will develop and implement accessibility standards in collaboration with persons with disabilities to disseminate the key knowledge for survival among people with disabilities and other general public. Next slide, please. There was a successful evidence of people with psychosocial disabilities and the community autonomous groups collaborated with the town authorities. This practice was conducted in Urakawa town in Hokkaido, where in 2011, March 11th, 2.8 meters of tsunami attacked this town, and there was property damage of significant amount, but there were no human casualties because of the evacuation, which was started immediately after the quake, led by people with severe psychosocial disability group of residents. Due to the support of the scientific community, including the international researchers on autism, World Wide Web Consortium, and the DAISY Consortium made up a team to develop a easy-to-understand scientific research-based evacuation manual to set out the evacuation goals, and drills were conducted regularly since 2005. And when tsunami hit that area, the group of people with psychosocial disabilities were the experts of tsunami evacuation. And the rest of the community residents could follow that evacuation flow. Next slide, please. The importance of the accessible and easy to understand manual is significant. And next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah. So there are people who cannot see or who have difficulties to see, and also people who cannot hear or difficulties to hear. So the people who are cognitive disabilities have sometimes hallucination and very difficult to understand clearly sometimes. But the manual and evacuation drills should be accessible to all those people. That may help new community residents with different languages, and travelers, and children, and old-aged people as a whole. So the people with disabilities may contribute if they actively take part in the disaster preparedness development. As a result, they can be a champion of the evacuation drills and lead the whole community for evacuation. Next slide, please. As the Ambassador Hoshino mentioned earlier this morning, we are engaged in the deployment of the new technology standard to make the motion pictures and broadcast accessible for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, or blind or low vision, which is a new standard for the IPTV accessibility. This is being demonstrated at the corner nearby the Vienna Cafe, just outside of this room. So if you are interested in further information, which is going to be deployed in Ecuador for the Build Back Better process in support of people with disabilities, please come to the exhibition and demonstration space. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Hiroshi, for your presentation and the wonderful work you're doing around the world on issues of making disaster alerts for persons with disabilities. The next speaker is Mr. Shitoshi Iliyama, co-founder of the University of Tokyo Empowerment Project. I would like to give him the floor for his presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Gallegos. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor that I can share our initiative on promoting support and accessibility for persons with disabilities, so empowerment today. My name is Satoshi Iyama, a student at the University of Tokyo. I would like to thank UN DESA for giving me this special opportunity to represent young people and share a youth initiative. These days, the number and complexity of mega disasters are increasing worldwide. Japan is one of the most disaster-prone countries and accumulated various good practices and lessons learned. At the time of East Japan Great Earthquake, persons with disabilities experienced lack of access to information, being left behind in tsunami, being excluded from evacuation site, and lack of inclusion in decision-making. However, at the same time, there also have been many positive experiences accumulated. One example is provision of psychological first aid, PFA, by aid workers and volunteers in communities. PFA is humane, supportive, and practical help to fellow human beings suffering serious crisis events. PFA is useful since it can be offered by anyone as an emotional and practical support, not depending on medical model. PFA respects self-determination of affected persons without forcing support. After PFA Guide for Fieldworks was published by WHO in 2011, PFA has been very popular. Japan is not an exception. In order to make PFA available to more people, our university and National Information Center for Disaster Mental Health, in collaboration with the UN University and UN Staff Counselor's Office, developed an online version of PFA orientation with a fund from Japan Agency for Medical Research and Development. This e-orientation, which is accessible with captions and audio guide, will be available for free on internet soon. Currently, we are developing an additional short e-orientation on the rights of persons with disabilities in emergency settings. Next slide, please. Based on lessons learned from these disaster responses, we started to feel that we need a transformative measure to overcome exclusion, in particular among marginalized ones. Particularly, Japan will be hosting 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games, and ensuring accessible environment for all is a key priority. So we, students at the university, together with persons with disabilities, and its close partnership with Dentsu, Japan's biggest advertising agency, revisited the social model in the convention. The social model understands disability as a result of social barriers due to lack of reasonable accommodation, not individual characteristics. Partly based on our recommendations on inclusion of persons with mental health conditions or psychosocial disabilities, which we submitted to the UN, we came up with an idea to promote awareness on social model and coming out by supporters. Because the social model is not widely known outside of the disability community. We named this initiative Empower Project, based on the SDG target 10.2, empower and promote inclusion of all. We developed a magenta star logo through which anyone can show his or her willingness to support others. We designed this project in a way young people can feel more accessible, particularly for those who are currently not very much interested in contributing to global or local cooperation. Especially, the logo was created with symbolic meanings and aims at what young people can integrate into their fashion. Next slide, please. Now, how to use Magenta Star. First, we put on the Magenta Star badge or sticker when we feel we can support others. Second, those who want to support will find us through Magenta Star and ask for support. Then, those who wear Magenta Star will provide requested support if possible. If needs are beyond our capacity, we try to link with someone who might be able to support. Next slide, please. Through promoting transformative culture, where those who wish to support come out with Magenta Star, rather than taking coming out by those who want support for granted. We want to realize truly inclusive culture. Coming out white supporter is useful for those who do not hope to disclose their personal identity or conditions, and those who have invisible conditions such as mental or intellectual impairments, those who are not feeling well, and others. In addition, this will be helpful for those who want to offer support but wondering how to express too. Therefore, Magenta Star is useful for both those who want support and those who want to support. The Empower project is innovative in its focus on needs of individuals, with seeing differences between on age, gender, or disability not as stereotypic barriers but as resources. Simultaneously, anyone can need support when not feeling well or being in a foreign town. Likewise, anyone can become a supporter. This can contribute to promoting resilience and peace in community, including after emergencies. Next slide, please. We have started to spread this project at various occasions, including at our university among students, at creative workshop among children, at a design event among influencers, and among persons with disabilities, as well as disaster-affected people in temporary housing. So far, it has been very successful in transforming individuals as a change agent to promote accessibility. We are planning to start working with young people in Malaysia, the Philippines, and other countries too. We are also in process of developing a partnership with an organization of persons with autism. We will continue to promote inclusion and accessibility worldwide through the Empower project in collaboration with various stakeholders, including the UN system, civil society organizations, including organizations of persons with disabilities, private sector, as well as young people, including youth with disabilities. I hope more partners join us and mobilize power of everyone. Since everyone is different anyway, mutual support might fill each other's gap. Small support can be big enough, and mutual support must be a key factor for realizing inclusion, empowerment, and resilience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Tatoshi. Now I will give the floor to Ms. Boran Lee, Disability Advisor at Women's Refugee Commission, for her presentation.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thanks to the moderator, His Excellency Ambassador Luis Gallego, the other panelists for sharing your ideas and perspectives, and UNDESA for hosting this event. Humanitarian crisis and disasters undermine sustainable development. As you probably have heard, the global population of people who have been forcibly displaced has reached a record 66 million in 2016, according to UNHCR. Over 80% of refugees are living in developing countries. The majority live in towns and cities alongside host communities. During these 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, we would like to reflect on what does it mean to answer the rallying cry of the Sustainable Development Goals, to leave no one behind. We think that development efforts must be inclusive of refugees and displaced people and prioritize countries affected by crisis and conflict. Humanitarian and development efforts must be coordinated and complementary. Building sustainable and resilient communities also means that we must look beyond the needs and vulnerabilities of refugees with disabilities to recognize and capitalize on the contributions they make to recovery and development. Organizations of women with disabilities can play a critical role in bridging the humanitarian development divide, representing the issues of refugee women and girls in national development programming and planning and human rights monitoring. Within this context, the Women's Refugee Commission has been researching, piloting, and advocating for approaches that strengthen the resilience of women, children, and youth with disabilities displaced by crisis and conflict. Since 2015, the Women's Refugee Commission has been partnering with regional networks of women with disabilities from crisis-affected countries to strengthen their leadership and engagement in humanitarian action at national, regional, and global levels. This was done by supporting women's DPOs to meet and exchange with each other in regional workshops in South Asia and Africa. They talked to refugee women and girls with disabilities, asking them about their experiences, what are their priorities, and what are their recommendations. Organizations of women with disabilities went on to carry out national level workshops engaging government ministry officials, UN agencies, and humanitarian stakeholders, and amplifying the voices of marginalized women and girls with disabilities and human rights monitoring mechanisms. As Executive Director, Jolie Achin of the National Union of Women with Disabilities in Uganda notes, including refugee women with disabilities strengthens our mandate as a human rights organization. It adds to our diversity when we make them part of our work, and this makes us unique. At global levels, the WRC supported regional networks of women with disabilities to nominate and send representatives to global convenings, such as the Commission on the Status of Women, the World Humanitarian Summit, and the Conference of State Parties. At these forums, women representatives shared joint advocacy statements, reaching policymakers and influencing international commitments, such as the Charter on Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in Humanitarian Action. We know that providing space and opportunity, networks of women with disabilities can foster more inclusive movements and more inclusive humanitarian and development responses. But it can't be a one-time effort. Pilot actions and positive practices must be upscaled with global leadership and coordination. Women with disabilities, those who are displaced, and those who are members of host communities need to continue to meet and share ideas and to expand their partnerships. Capacity development, including resource mobilization, must prioritize organizations of women with disabilities in conflict-affected countries if we truly want to leave no one behind. I look forward to your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your on-time presentation. Now, I would like to present Mr. Victor Pineda by video. Victor is a world leader of the disability movement, and he is the president of World Enabled. So please pass the video from Victor, please.
This is Victor Pineda. I am the president of World Enabled and the Global Alliance on Accessible Technologies and Environments. It's an honor to be with you today as we celebrate almost 25 years of the International Day of Disability. On this day, we're looking at the ways that practical solutions by people on the ground are making a difference in the lives of persons with disabilities. What we want to talk about today is disaster risk reduction, a trending topic that has created opportunities and created new pathways to ensuring equal rights for people with disabilities. Amongst the groups that are most vulnerable to disaster risk reduction include estimated 15% of the general population that lives with a disability. Urban development and accessibility have a direct role in thinking about how to build more resilient and responsive cities. I serve as the co-chair of the Global Network on Disability Inclusive and Accessible Urban Development. And through our work with United Nations Habitat, we were able to create 16 references in the new urban agenda that specifically address the needs of persons with disabilities. This opportunity also provides an opening to connect these global frameworks with frameworks like the CRPD, like the Sendai framework, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. In risk identification, we have an opportunity to look at how various man-made risks and hazards or natural disasters will unequally impact the lives of people with disabilities. Whether it's risk reduction, preparedness, financial protection, and resilient reconstruction, urban planners and local communities and activists, architects, and city leaders, including technology leaders within a city that are deploying new innovative solutions, have a role to play in addressing these issues. We have a few key recommendations for you to consider. We need to recognize the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities as a key instrument in disaster risk management. We have to look at how the Sendai Framework Section 36A is looking at these issues also from a perspective of participation and inclusion. And we have to consider that people with disabilities have a unique role to play in developing solutions through data collection efforts, as well as through disaggregating data by race, age, gender, and disability. We could use the Washington City Group short set of questions to continue to support people in the field in these data collection efforts. Ultimately, we need practical examples. And we have examples in Ecuador with a project called Red Alerta, which is leveraging social media and disaster responders to really create a much more targeted approaches towards people with disabilities in the time of needs in a disaster where there are immediate efforts to locate support. There's also a global effort that I'm leading with my colleague James Thurston at G3ICT called Smart Cities for All. Smart Cities for All is looking at the ways that technology is being deployed in cities, smart cities, and the ways that we can make these more inclusive to people with disabilities, the way that cities can leverage technology to better respond to the needs of all people. As we think about cities in the future, we have to realize that we have new capacities and new ways to create inclusion, whether it's building off of our dynamic community of advocates or whether it's connecting to city planners with technology leaders. I think we have new tools that can help ensure that nobody's left behind. I invite you to join us at the World Urban Forum in Kuala Lumpur. We'll have a large delegation of people with disabilities, ensuring that these kinds of issues, cross-cutting issues, really come to the forefront and allowing us to really implement the Sustainable Development Goals on a local level and create cities for all. Thank you so much.
Well, we have to recognize the leadership that Victor Pineda has on these subjects and all the members of this panel. We are going to have a brief Q&A, for around 10 minutes, and I would like to open the floor to any one of you who would like to ask a question from the panelists now that we have them. So please, any adventurous individual or who would like to raise his hand and ask a question. Diego. No, I'm sorry, the ambassador of Ecuador.
Diego is still my name. So, thank you, Ambassador, for this wonderful panel and all the panelists. I thank you all for mentioning Ecuador, especially the colleagues, Mr. Kawamura, and the friend that was speaking on the video. I'm very curious about the details of these programs that you are announcing, because Ecuador participated very actively in Sendai and in Japan about this resilience and to pay attention to the disaster risk reduction and everything. And we consider the disabilities a transversal process in all what we are doing. The efforts of Ecuador, we presented here many years ago, I mean 5 or 6 years, a program called Ecuador Without Barriers, which was more or less the thing that you were telling us. The problem is that we need the resources to implement these ideas, barriers that are physical. We have to make the streets accessible to the persons with disabilities, the transportation. After that, the work. We have to make rules in order to let people with disabilities join works in the private and public sector, and especially the mental barrier, which is to consider people with disabilities in an inclusive manner. It's a very tough way that we are going along, but without the support of a convention like this, we are not able to do something like that. So I thank you very much, Japan, for your comments, and I would like to know a little bit more about that, because it's a wonderful idea to have it. I was working on the phone trying to get from my people in Ecuador some kind of actualization of that, what you were telling us, and they are exactly joining your idea. They are in the process of implementing it in the Ecuador system, but it's a wonderful notice that I thank you for sharing it with us. Thank you, Ambassador Gallegos.
Thank you very much for the wonderful response from Ecuadorian representative. So in January, I'll be in Ecuador, Quito, Guayaquil, and Puerto Viejo, and to discuss further on how to collaborate. Our experience in Japan has clear evidence that people with intellectual or mental disabilities may become a very important resource for the community resilience. And it requires well-thought strategy to develop the capacity of people with those disabilities. But we believe that it is possible, and the scientific research should be associated with the collaboration with people with such cognitive or intellectual disabilities. We have elements which will enable those people understand the scientific knowledge and enable those people with severe intellectual disabilities to get skills. But the coordination is very important. The trust each other is also important. The community at large needs to be developed to be a good platform to enable each individuals in the community. So those are the key elements, and I'd like to share more in Ecuador and also share with the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
I have two hands raised. Eric, please. I'm calling on everybody by his first name. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, and congratulations first of all, Ambassador Gallegos for the moderating, and also the panelists. I have 2 points and comments and maybe questions. The one is to request to Mr. Kawamura, because the case you share with in Japan, this big earthquake and the Urakawa town, is really demonstrating that a person with disability could be, they are the agents of change and the contributor for resilient building and also reduction of the risks. So I would like to request maybe a copy of the role play clip that was shown and displayed in the Sendai conference. It is very a telling story. We would like to use that broadly. Second is regarding a lot of questions, discussions here is regarding the why is it so important to include persons with disability to make sure that our environments to be more accessible. But we also notice that there are less, we don't have many evidence-based research and cases to support and make a strong case that increase the accessibility, increase the environment accessibility, really carrying this, not only say like it's not a very big cost issue if we design it and build it in an initial stage like Victor in his video showcased, but we also like to demonstrate and tell the investor and the decision makers that increase the accessibility actually bring these economic and social benefits. It's very important because at the end of the day, when we can think about in the real scenario in our life, in our cities, in our communities, it's a matter of that's lots of competing interests, competing priorities, and it's a matter for these decision maker and investor companies to invest wisely and being smarter. So my question is to Margaret and see if you like World Bank in your team that's actually have some evidence-based research in this sphere, or we can propose maybe in the United Nations or DESA can enhance some cooperation in the future with the World Bank in this particular area. Basically, economic social benefits of increased environmental accessibility in context of sustainable development and resilient building. Thank you.
Okay, briefly. The people in Urakawa representatives are invited by the government of Germany to commemorate the International Day of Persons with Disabilities this year. And their presentation will be conducted on the 3rd of December, 3rd or 4th of December. And I think the version, the role play version conducted at the Sendai UN disaster conference was just 13 minutes. But in Germany, there will be a revised version, which will be half an hour. So I think I will compare the Sendai version and the Germany version. And I can promise to share the better one with the complete manuscripts and videos. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the comment. I think you've identified a really important area. We actually don't have much on the benefits analysis of this. In fact, it was one of the areas that's been identified that we can hopefully contribute to. So happy to discuss further collaboration. I mean, we have to, in the World Bank, we have to recognize that our place is run by economists and our counterparts are ministries of finance. So we always have to talk to the bottom line. No, we can talk about humanitarian and social causes. I'm not an economist, but some of my best friends are. But we have to make that case. We didn't advance as much on gender until we started talking the economics of women's empowerment. Same thing on disaster risk management. When we started talking about impacts on GDP, that's when we started advancing on this. So I think it's a really important area. So happy to talk more.
Thank you very much, Mark. I have a hand raised there. If you can identify yourself, please.
Yes, Cynthia Stewart. I'm vice chair of the NGO Committee on Aging here in New York, and we're very pleased to be a co-sponsor of today's program. And I think bringing together persons with disabilities and persons who are older is a very important area for us to recognize because of the issues are very, very similar in terms of the multiplicity of discrimination that has occurred and does occur over the lifetime. But I'm particularly pleased with the theme of resilience. And I think seeing the videos of those small children, I want to say, I want those small children to be fruitful, productive adults, and I want them to age with dignity. And I think this is a forum by which we all can make that happen. I'm particularly concerned about in areas of disaster where older persons, you've already pointed out, are much more likely not to survive those situations. But oftentimes, who's left behind in those areas without the resources, the means to perhaps relocate or in settlements? And what happens to older persons? And older people have disabilities also. And so I just think that it's important for the theme of leaving no one behind that we recognize that lifespan approach, that aging begins at birth and it doesn't end until we die. So I really commend you all, but any comments on further research and how we might promote a better cooperation there would be most welcome. Thank you.
Very much for your comments. I have time for one more question. The gentleman in the back, please. Yes. Very short question, please. Please. No, you have to press the button.
Yeah, I'm
The one to your, the one under the microphone.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I apologize. My name is Michael Martinez. I am a student at the City University of New York and an alumni Koch Scholar at LaGuardia Community College. I'm writing on a paper on economic decision-making during communications and emergencies. And I thank the panel for their comments today. It's really enlightening. So a problem that I identified in my core studies and in my current research is that there is social amplification of risk. That includes the lack of trust and barriers from familiarizing resources and those providers of resources. So my question is, what is the best way to overcome social amplification of risk? Thank you.
I'm going to have to ask you to approach the panel afterwards because I have a problem in timing. They just announced that there is a video following this. So I'd like to give the floor to the permanent representative of Italy who was here to distinguish this meeting. So I give you the floor, Mr. Permanent Representative, please.
I just want to say that I am really honored, and honored is the most appropriate word that I can use, to present and help you to organize the performance of Medea by Teatro Patologico that will be held on Monday, next Monday at 6:15 in the ECOSOC chamber. The founder or president of Teatro Patologico, Dario D'Ambrosi, is right here beside to me. It's an incredible person. I also want to thank Daniela Bass DESA for support this event. Dario's work in the last 30 years has been extraordinary, helping young person with disability to express their passions, fully enjoy their rights in fully adherence to the Convention of the Rights with persons with disability. And being Italian, how he helped these people to express their right with a theater, with an artistic approach. It is a unique show, really, a unique show. It's been around in the world. Tonight they have another performance here in New York. Recently, it was congratulated by His Holiness the Pope Francis. I think that if you have time to go to this show, you have a great time, and you will help millions of people with disabilities around the world to strengthen their rights and to become an artist. That's very, very good for us. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you.
I think there is a short movie now.
Before passing the video, I would like to thank the members of the panel for their participation. It's always an honor for us to be part of this panel, and for me especially to moderate this very important panel convoked by DESA and these organizations. Thank you very much for your attendance. We have a small video clip that the ambassador has just announced, so please be with us on this.
There will never be a science able to establish up until when your brain will endure.
Cerchiamo veramente di fare la crescita del lavoro, dobbiamo crescere tantissimo, Adesso abbiamo ripreso un pochettino il feeling di che cos'è lo spettacolo. Anche quando voi avete questi bastoni, tam, 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 sangue, sangue, tam, è come se buttasse sangue, tutte queste cose il pubblico lo sente che sta buttando il sangue. È un significato molto grande, è un segno violentissimo, è come un quadro. E così anche noi abbiamo la magia di marciare, con questa cosa sentiamo il sangue. Cioè Medea sta spargendo il sangue sull'umanità, è un segno molto grande, molto forte, è un significato grandissimo. È un significato che se non si rispetta, se non ci si vuole bene, se non ci si ama, ci sarà spargimento di sangue, come sempre. Dio vi ha fatto nascere così, con la vostra handicap, con la vostra problematica, perché voleva che fossero diversi dagli altri. E noi dobbiamo dare questa diversità. È una forza, la nostra diversità.
There can be no prosperity in a society that is sick. This is the project we must follow in order to live in a healthy society, a rich society. This is the path we are taking.
Well, I thank you all. So, Medea, 4th of December, Echoes of Chamber, starting at 6:15 p.m. for 1 hour of very good theater. Thank you very much. I would like then to invite you to have 2 hours of nice rest, good conversations and dialogues. For those who didn't receive some of the answers, remember, during the Commission for Social Development that will take place from the 29th of January to the 7th of February, discussions will be held on aging and the World Plan of Action and the Madrid Plan of Action on Aging. and on disability and innovative solutions and much more. So this conversation and this celebration can be carried on at the end of January with other representatives of governments and eminences. I invite you to have a nice rest, lots of dialogues, lots of networking, goal 17, partnerships and networking, and join us again here in the afternoon from 3 to 6, and let's build together the societies of the future we want. Thank you.